Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hello friends and welcome to the next weekly wrap-up that we have. This one I am so excited to dive into. I'm always excited to do my weekly wrap-ups. They're my favorite because they don't take a lot of planning and I get to gush about all the books that I read this week. It's so exciting. And this week we have two new favorites to add to the list. One of them I was hopeful, like I had a hunch, but I've been disappointed before. And another one I had no thought at all to it being a new favorite, and those are just the best, absolutely. First up, we got to start the top of the video with welcoming two new patrons to the channel. They may be new to the channel, but they're definitely not new to supporting me, so welcome Shannon and Heather. Thank you both so much for supporting me on Patreon. It means so much to me. As I get closer to the year again, I get more nervous about taxes and boring shit, but it's still stressful, and when I see people coming back to continue supporting me and sticking around, it makes the tension in my chest a little looser and it makes things more fun. So, of course, I want to talk about my Etsy shop real quick. Just gotta do the self promo there. I still have some of the lovely like spooky sleeves that I put in. I did add these lovely like skull roses and like a crow one in. There's still a couple of the lovely pink skull ones in, and these ghosties, by the way, I don't know if I shared this, these actually glow in the dark. So yeah, these pretty little pink and white ghosties, when you hold them up to the light and turn it off, they glow in the dark, which is adorable. And then I do have some of the strawberries left, as well as some of my country collection is still up there as well. I have some fun new stuff coming to the shop soon, so even if you're not interested in any of the designs that are currently up there, you maybe want to follow the shop. I do have a few. There won't be a lot of these that go up because I just have to make them a bit pricier because of the size, but I am working on a few hardcover book cover sleeves. So there'll be some that fit literally books this size, which we all know these ones need some protection in our bags if we put them in there. And I also have some in the size that will fit Kindle Oasis. Kindle Oasis does tend to fit inside of these from what I've heard from my people who've bought them, but I did have some like oddly sized scraps left over, and they ended up being about a little bit wider, which I think will fit Kindle Oasis, as well as like extra large mass market paperbacks, aka like Outlander ones. So they will be thicker and fit books that are a bit bigger like this. So those will be coming soon. I just have to have the time to sew them. And there will be limited quantities of those just because they're a less popular one that people will need to buy. But yeah, those will be coming soon. So definitely check out my Etsy shop, at least be following it if you're not interested. But as always, I have a discount code for people who watch me here, which is the Book Refuge 10, and you get 10% off. Make sure you are using that, okay? I want my people to be getting their discounts for sure. All right, let's dive into the books because we do have 11 books to talk about. Some absolutely fantastic ones, some very strange and unusual ones, and some that I am going to try to refrain from ranting about. I know you guys like a rant. I know it because anytime that I'm nervous that I'm going to rant too much, y'all are just like, oh, give us the rant. And I get it because I like watching people rant as well. But I don't like the anger that I feel when I want to rant. Like I don't do this to rant and be angry. Like I don't read books to be angry. And some anger me in different ways. There's some where I get really ticked off at how the tropes play out. Like I think it was last week or the week before where there was that secret baby one that just stuck in my craw that I didn't like. That is when a trope is used badly. Then there's times where there's an author that I hold in very high esteem and they just continue to write stories that absolutely baffle me. And that is the case for this first one here, which is My Temptation by T.L. Swan. Now, I guess it shouldn't baffle me anymore because I haven't enjoyed the last two books that T has put out, but it still hurts my heart because, The Takeover is in my top books of all time, and there's just that part of me, that hopeful girly that just can't quite give up on that I want this author to write me better books, you know, like I just can't quite give up that hope. But anyway, this is the first in her new series that's going to be Kingston Lane. It's going to be a neighborhood romance, basically. So there's this fancy neighborhood where all these single men live that are friends. Some of them are doctors. Some of them are, one of them is an engineer, all this stuff. And it's going to be about these heroes who live on this street, basically. And this first one here is about Juliet and Henley. So Henley James is our hero. Boy, what a boy he is. And Juliet is our heroine. Now, she is a nurse and Henley is an engineer. And this story begins with them having a one-night stand. And it goes very well. It's very hot. We dive into a nice sexy scene right away. It's going great. And then he kind of ghosts her, doesn't call her the next day. Like, literally, it's like a really great date. They have an amazing connection. They're going to hang out the next day, and he doesn't call her. And then I think it's like a week later, I think it's just about a week later, she's out to like brunch with her brother. And she sees Henley there. And Henley comes over, and he's already acting all like prickish because she's with another guy. And her brother gets it in his head to say that he's her fiance. He's like, this is my fiance, Juliet, which doesn't make Juliet look the best. But it's also, she's kind of like, well, I don't want to be with this guy anyway if he was going to ghost me. If he couldn't even text me to say he wasn't interested, he couldn't let me know that, hey, you know, actually, I got what I wanted out of this one night stand. I don't want to see you again. He couldn't do that. So the brother pretends that he's her fiance, and then Henley storms off that thinking like, wow, I like cheated with this girl. Which, again, I do think wasn't the smartest move, but it was her brother who did it. It wasn't her. She just didn't correct it because she was like, whatever, this gets me away from this guy. Now, it's a couple years later, and she's moving into this neighborhood. She finally has a place where she could buy a home. She buys a more rundown home in this neighborhood than the others have, and she's going to start renovating it. And she also gets to get a dog for the first time, and so she's moving into this neighborhood. And who should be her next door neighbor but Henley? And who should decide, based on them having this one night stand 2 years ago and him thinking that she's a cheater, that she shouldn't stay in their neighborhood because they had a bad one night stand? Okay. So they end up having kind of this animosity being next to each other. And again, it is fair that he thinks she was kind of sleazy for cheating on her fiance, but he's also like, where is this fiance? And she also knows that, like, wow, sooner or later my brother's going to come over and this is going to be weird. So we're in a tight little pickle here, and that's just fine. And some people might find this hilarious and just think, oh, look at the pickle we're in. It's so funny. Oh my God. But to me, I just rolled my eyes. And I rolled my eyes even more because he's supposed to be 33. She's in her late 20s. They act like fucking children. And this is the problem that I've had in the last couple TL Swans. And it even made me think about the takeover a little bit differently again. But here's the thing that works with the takeover. Okay, here's why it works. Tristan is dealing with children. So when he acts a little childish, when he fights fire with equal fire, he is doing it with children. You know, so like, I'm okay with the antics in the takeover, and I did feel safe after thinking this through. I don't have to hate the takeover. It's just fine. Because again, he's dealing with children. Juliet and Henley, they are not children. They are adults who'd had a one-night stand, which would make you hope that they would act like adults, but they don't. And then the dog gets involved, and there's some really fun, cute stuff with her adopted dog, who he has some like separation anxiety, and he's a bit more troubled than she should think. And being a nurse and, you know, being gone sometimes makes it difficult for her dog, who has abandonment issues. Like, that stuff's cute. I don't blame the dog. The dog gave this a whole nother star than I was going to give it. I'm going to be honest with you. But because I was sewing on projects and working on things, I just let this book play out. Even when there became a point where we find out that the reason Henley hadn't called her the next day, the reason why he wasn't going to, is that the women that he likes, that he has a chance with, that he thinks they could actually end up dating, he ghosts them because he has commitment issues. But if there was a girl that he has a one-night stand with that is a slut, and he's not going to fall for her because she's a skank, then he's nice to them because he's going to get pussy out of it without the threat of commitment, right? You can see just how that probably stoked my anger. And by the end of this book, I was so annoyed. But I just, yeah, it's not horrible. Here's the thing. It didn't anger me as much as like The Do-Over because I wasn't invested in the characters in this book. It was still funny. The narration was pretty good. There was some hot stuff in it. He does end up like, there is some touching stuff that has to do with his father, which I'll talk about the trigger warnings in a minute that are difficult. But like, there's some touching things in here. But what really was hard for this is once the heroine finds out like why he ghosted her, it's like she completely forgives him. Well, again, she also finds something out about his father where she's like, oh, he's just a hurt little boy who has commitment issues. And so this woman becomes so damn thirsty for Tristan, or not Tristan, I'm sorry. Freudian slip there. I wish this was Tristan. For Henley, that she is basically willing to give him anything to get him to want to be with her. And she, like, is willing to, like, whore herself out to this man for the hope that he'll maybe commit to her. And the way that she thinks about how desperate she tries to get to win him, I lost all respect for Juliet. That was completely gone. And I was just like, what are we doing with this? So we're going to move on. We're going to move on because we're 10 minutes into this video. But I ended up giving it 3 stars. I know, it seemed like I should give it less. But again, I wasn't like over the head committed to these characters. And there was some very touching stuff that had to do with Henley's father. So his father has dementia. His mother has passed. And there is a lot of triggering stuff having to do with having a parent with dementia. And death of a parent. And other emotional stuff that has to do with that. For which there was not a single trigger warning. And this is where like I got really pissed after I read this book. Because before I read this book, I did just go to a few reviews to see if there was any trigger warnings at all. There's no trigger warning in the book, which isn't a surprise. T doesn't have trigger warnings in her books, really, from what I've seen. But no reviewers had the kindness to list it at all. So the first day, before I read it, I checked out like 10 reviews. Just quick. I wasn't reading any detailed stuff. I was just looking at the bottom of reviews for content warnings or anything, and there was nothing. So I listened to this book, and there was, to me, a really traumatic loss of a parent in here. Like, we know about the loss of his mother, but the loss of the father in this and seeing him with dementia and seeing what he's going through. There was not a single trigger warning for that until after I finished. And I was pissed. After I finished, I went back to Goodreads and I had to read through 25 reviews before I finally found a helpful person who put a trigger warning in this, okay? Now, again, I'm not the trigger warning, you know, like, I'm trying to use a word without using the word everyone used for that. I'm not the trigger warning, like, hold you to the fire type of person. I get that. But I was reading people who read ARCs, who read reviews, and no one put it in there, right? Like, as someone who, I read ARCs, I read early advances. If I had read stuff like this, I would have put a content warning for this at least, right? I don't know. Again, I don't like to become a crazy person about this because I understand that there are just some people who don't see this stuff as content warnings, and if it's not a dark romance, they don't even worry about putting stuff in. But it just makes me conscious of the fact that because you guys hear me roll my eyes, because I have a platform where people are looking to me for reviews. That's why I feel like I need to share content and trigger warnings, right? That's why I do it. It's not because I feel like holier than thou because I'm listing them. And you know what? I won't even know them all the time because there are things that have trigger warnings that won't be trigger warnings to other people or aren't them to me that I don't think to list them. But I do my damnedest. I promise. I really do. And if there's ones I missed, it's because I didn't think of them or when I was thinking back, they didn't come up. But the fact that there was 25 people that I read who read arcs of the book who didn't list this, I'm like, wow, nobody's lost someone in a traumatic way at all. And it was really traumatic for me because of the specific situation. Again, so I'm sorry I went on a mini rant about this because, again, I'm not saying that everyone has to be responsible for it. I just couldn't believe that I read 25 reviews before I found one. That's what irked me because I needed a heads up about this specific type of trigger warning because I lost a loved one very similar to, not with the dementia part, but there was an accident, there was a thing, and then there was life support, and then we had to make the decision to stop, and you're just waiting for that person to go. And it's a special kind of pain that when I was done with this, like, you know, I've shared this, I don't go through, like, triggering moments from books. I can read very dark stuff. It's usually the real life stuff, like loss of children, loss of babies, miscarriages and like deaths of loved ones in hospitals and stuff, that is hard for me because those are my real life things. Also alcoholic parents and stuff like that. Real life, real stuff, you know, whereas like kidnapping, that happens in real life, but you're generally not like romances about it aren't really real. That's a fantasized version, but losing a loved one in a hospital is. Okay, I spent another 5 minutes on this. My point being, I'm not trying to start up a trigger warning conversation. I'm just personally telling you that I felt personally victimized by this book specifically. So I'm telling you, if you have content warnings or trigger warnings about losing a loved one in a hospital, a loved one with dementia, the grief of that, grief counseling, that stuff, like this book got way heavier than anyone was letting me know, based on people are like, oh, this was so funny, oh my god, this book was hilarious, oh, it was so hot. Nobody mentioned how like dark this got in some moments. So I'm here to tell you about it. Okay, I talked about this way too much. Moving along. Next, I read Whispers in the Dark by Lily Mayne and Nicole Knight. This was an anticipated release for me. This is, I think, one of Lily Mayne's first like collaborative books that she's done. And this is the first in the Oasis series. Now, this one's going to be very hard to explain, but basically it's a monster under the bed. But this monster comes from like a nightmare realm. And when we enter into nightmares, we actually are entering into this different realm. And one day, there's this man named Cody who he has a pretty depressing life, actually. This one also involves a like basically terminally ill parent who is also a very abusive parent in this case. Like he has like diabetes and he's almost like crippled from it. And he stays at home and it's him and his half brother there. But his half brother is a homophobic asshole and is very like bullying, and so is the father. The father's very bullying, uses a lot of homophobic language to him, even though he's bisexual, and it's not like he's bringing men home. Like he works from home, he takes care of his dad who was extremely abusive to him, and just like all this stuff. It's awful, and yeah, it's not great. And anyway, when he enters this dream realm, nightmare realm, this one time, this sleep demon named Noor follows him home, and they become aware of each other, and then a relationship starts forming when they start talking to each other, and then they get sexually curious about each other because Noor can feel all of Cody's emotions. So when Cody starts to be like curious about him, like Noor can like feel it, and that kind of helps bridge the gap of something sexual happening. And eventually Cody asks if he can visit where Noor is from, and so then we get some crossover between the realms. But meanwhile, there is a very dark storyline happening in his home with abuse and eventually attempted sexual abuse from his half-brother. So there's a lot of trigger warnings in this one. It was very dark, and honestly, the story as a whole didn't leave me feeling as hopeful at the end as I wanted it to. It just was bad. This one also had death of a parent. Yeah, taking care of an ill parent who is abusive to you. And it was a rough one. I mean, yes, it had some good kinky monster anatomy and stuff, but I don't know. Well, I'm interested to see what like the next book in the series will be, of like how it will happen. Although I understand that like Cody needed to be having these nightmares to even go to this realm or whatever, but yeah. So I gave it 4 stars, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale, but mind the content warnings for that of abusive parent, abusive family environment, homophobia, and attempted essay. Okay, then we have kind of a fun one. So the audiobook for this book finally came out, so it was time to read it. So I listened to Nero by S.J. Tilley. This is one of the ones that I got when I went to North Iowa Book Bash, because S.J. Tilley is kind of a local author, which made this very fun because this mafia romance takes place in Minneapolis, which was cool. And the hero actually takes a trip to Fargo to kill the heroine's stepfather because he was abusive to her when she was young, and he tried to like sell her virginity. And when Nero finds out about that, he takes a trip in his private plane to Fargo to kill this guy. So Fargo is named in a dark romance, and I liked it. Okay, it was great. But anyway, this was a pretty bonkers book, right? Okay, I was excited to read this. you know, when you get the recommendation from the author themselves, that's really great. But then I really saw this book series kind of blowing up, well, a little bit on like, there's a book box that's doing these books and some stuff like that, which is exciting. But yeah, this one starts very interesting. So the heroine, her name is Peyton, and she wakes up one night in her apartment to someone has broken in. Well, she did leave her second floor patio door cracked, and Nero has entered it to hide from the police. He's literally there like with a gun, and he's climbed in and found her there. And he just sits with her on the couch and like talks to her, and it's a very strange interaction. And then she actually falls asleep to him there, and he leaves, and he is like stolen. I think he like steals her shampoo or her body wash and like leaves $100 behind for her body wash. It's crazy. And now after this experience, he begins stalking her. He starts stalking her because he just had this crazy connection with her when he had climbed in her bedroom, and he begins following her. And eventually he can't stay away anymore, and he interacts with her, and he becomes obsessed with her. But he really shouldn't, because if people find out that he's interested in a woman, then she'll become a target. But it becomes one of those where he just becomes completely obsessed with her, and he's basically like, I'm gonna take her no matter what I have to do. And so he does. The dialogue and thoughts in this were beyond cringy, y'all. Like, I have to say that some of the words during the sex scenes are just, I was making this face to some of them. And just some of his dialogue to her is, it wasn't great. Okay, it wasn't great. But by the time that I finished this book, number one, I want to read the next one, King. I've already downloaded it. I kind of want to wait for the audiobook for that one too. But I want to read the next one. And it had a certain charm. Now, I know some of that charm is because it takes place in Minneapolis and Fargo. Like, it had me smiling for that. And also because he is a complete marshmallow for her and just wants to do everything for her. And the sex was pretty hot. But it also was just, it doesn't stand up great as a mafia romance in my mind. But again, I have a soft spot for it. Like, I didn't hate it, even though it was kind of like, what the hell type of thing. So I gave it 3.5 stars because, like, I was charmed. It's a 4 on the spice scale. It does have some really great spicy content. Like, there's anal, there's spanking, there's a breeding kink, there's unprotected sex with a stranger. Because yes, the first time they have sex is her leaving her window open again so that he will come in, and she is still a virgin and she wants him to be the one to take it. So, all right. But it is one of those where, like, once he's taken her virginity, he's like, that's it. She's mine. She didn't know what she was inviting into her home, but she's mine now. So, yeah, that happened. But yeah, there are trigger warnings of threat of assault in her past. There's violence, murder, stalking, and kidnapping. So there's that. Like I said, it wasn't great, but I was charmed. So, you know, sometimes that just happens. Sometimes that happens. Then I read An Arc of Shattered Secrets by Lillian Harris. So this was my first Lillian Harris. I'm now like on her art team and street team, so I'll definitely will be reading more of hers. I'm excited to do that actually because I saw a lot of promise in this one. I really did. So I actually read a lot of Mafia this week. We'll get to more of that shortly. This is like a standalone within her series, I guess. And this one was about Hadley and Hudson. And I gotta tell you, there was too many damn H names in this book. I'll tell you that right now, because yeah. But this is this couple. They've been married for a few years, and she has no idea that he is a mafia lawyer. She knows that he's a lawyer. He had actually helped her get away from her abusive husband. She got married really young, didn't realize she was in an abusive situation, and so she goes to see a lawyer, and it happens to be his firm. And so he helps her with this, and then they end up together. So all this was like in their past. Now in the present time, she doesn't know what he does for a living, but they have this beautiful life. They're having fertility issues, but other than that, their life is really great until there's some people who come for Hudson, and he ends up getting attacked, and he just disappears. he just disappears and they can't find him, and the police aren't really helping her. And then she starts finding out all these secrets, and she starts finding out that not only is Hudson involved in a life that she had no idea about for all these years, but all the people who are friends and loved ones to her through him are all a part of it, and she had no idea. Also, she finds out once he is gone that she's pregnant, so their infertility has been a thing, and now she finally has her dream come true, but now she doesn't have her partner, so it's very difficult. So yeah, so we have an amnesia romance, but first we have the agony of this woman trying to find her husband and just keeps running up against block after block. And then 4 years later, she gets a call from one of the people who'd been looking for him. He's always been looking for him. And he says, we found him. He's in this small town. And he's actually the mayor of this small town. And so she rushes there to meet him. And he has no idea who she is. And he even has a different name at this time. So this is a very interesting take on an amnesia romance. And I really don't want to spoil anything for you. This book was very high angst. It definitely was. I won't lie. There was parts in this book where my guts were in agony. And I was like, why am I here? Why am I here in this book right now? And it was, I wanted to throw the Kindle sometimes. I was so mad. However, by the time that, like, they were starting to, have a chance to be together again, I thought it was so beautiful watching them fall again and just watching how they make their way to the HEA. Like I said, I don't want to spoil that. But what I want to say is that this amnesia romance, without spoiling this for you, does something that I've never seen an amnesia romance do. And it was a bold choice. And it's why I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was tough there for a bit, I won't lie. But if you have liked amnesia romance, if you do, maybe you don't, maybe you're one of the people. I did my one of my YouTube shorts where I said what's tropes that never work for you, and a couple people said amnesia romance, so I know this one won't be for you. But if you have liked amnesia romance and you like mafia or like the darker sides of it, I think you might really enjoy this. And it definitely has me wanting to read more Lillian Harris, and I can't wait. I have some more of her books on my TBR for this month as well. One of the mafia series that connected to this one I have, so definitely going to try that. So I gave this one 4 stars, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And again, there are some kinkiness of anal, spanking, and a very dominant man, which is hot. And the trigger warnings for this are infertility, violence, and stalking. Next, I read a really crazy little short thing, which I won't talk about very much because it really wasn't for me. And so I didn't like it a lot, and I don't want to like rag on it because it wasn't for me. But I read Hollow by C.M. Nescosta. So this is there's 2 little shorts in here. I guess they are shorts that were originally like released to her Patreon. Well, I think a lot of her stuff is released to her Patreon first. That makes sense. But this had a little like 40-page like short story that is a MMM locker room thing. And it is 2 headless horsemen and Ichabod Crane have a threesome in the locker room of the polo club. And it's pretty hot. It has some degradation. It has some cream filling. It has breeding kink. Like, it is spicy, and it was really hot. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And then there's a second one that is more of a, like, I don't want to say more faithful, but it is a Headless Horseman like retelling, and it has Katrina Von Trussell, and she starts being followed by the ghost of Sleepy Hollow, who as it gets closer to Halloween becomes more corporeal, and she ends up having a little like fling with him, and then after Halloween he's gone again. And so she makes plans for the next Halloween when he will be visible again, that she wants him, but she needs to find him a head. So she does that, and it's about, who she picks to be the head for Ichabod Crane. And don't ask me how this magically works, because I'm like, well, who controls the body? Like, if you're going to find him a head and it's going to be from someone, that we're going to remove that head from someone, isn't that someone still going to be themselves, or are they going to be... It made no sense. It doesn't have to make sense. But I just didn't like it. I didn't like Katrina. She was sleeping with everybody in town just because, and then she decides she wants the ghost the most. The men that she's been with, I don't know, but I didn't like how she went about getting this head, and it just made her unlikable. And then I'm like, why? You're like ruining people's lives so you can have a ghost have a head. Like, I don't know. I didn't like it. So I gave it like 2 stars, and it was like a 3.5 on the spice scale. I mean, again, the first part I liked, and it was really hot. Like, everybody was consensual and what was going on in there. Like, it was great. And the second one I didn't like. It wasn't for me. I just want more out of like a creepy or a monster romance. I know. But I love monster romance and weird romances, but I still want to feel that they're really romantic for me. And neither one of these like was that. Like, one was just a spicy erotic thing, which is fine. And the other one I was like, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, moving on, like I said, because we got more stuff to talk about. All right, then I read To Tempt a Scandalous Lord by Liana de la Rosa, and this is the last book in the Once Upon a Scandal series. I have loved this. All these books are on AnyPlay. I think her books, no, they're not in Kindle Unlimited, I don't think, but I love this. And this was one of the ones that I got at, I got this one at Book Bonanza as well. So this one is about Alicia Lindsay. She is a widowed Countess of Lindsay, and she is not planning to be with a man anymore. She's over it. She's free to do what she wants. Then she meets Niall Campbell, the Marquis of Inverray. We've liked him. He's the older brother of some of the heroines we've read before, and he wants to be the prime minister, and so he's involved in politics. Now, our heroine, she writes for a paper that secretly is written mostly by women who they go through a few different like levels to be able to get their stuff put in there. So she's a political commentator, and she's trying to kind of like make people in politics think more about, you know, the things that they back and like and the choices that they are making. Now, of course, the people reading these words think that this is just someone trying to cause trouble, and that's what Niall thinks originally as well. But when she meets Niall like in person through some new friends that she's made, she actually thinks he's very charming and that he's a really good man and that he does have a lot of good plans, but he, you know, to get the labor reform that he wants to happen, he knows that he has to play games. And she's like, why do we have to play these games? Let's just, you know, do what needs to be done. And it's like, well, it doesn't like work that way, lady. Like, it doesn't work that way. But things go a little bit sideways when they are at a ball together. They end up dancing, and her dress gets stuck in his, ends up getting stuck on his coat, and when he steps away, it rips the front of her dress, and so now they need to do a marriage of convenience. And yeah, so that's what this is. I also love Niall because he is the one who started the foundling home. We've seen his sisters involved in this foundling home, as well as one of our other heroines who became like a teacher there at one point. And so he loves these children in this foundling home. And so when the heroine gets to see him interacting with these kids, she realizes that he really does want there to be child labor reform and that he really does care about the kids. She just doesn't understand why his political actions don't like match that. So yeah, we get to see how these two figure it all out. And I liked it a lot. I gave this one 4 stars. It was a 2 on the spice scale. There's a trigger warning for illness, but it also means there's some sick bed scenes in this that were really lovely. And overall, I highly recommend this series. It had a lot of different kinds of diversity involved in it, including a Jewish heroine. And yeah, it was really good. I love that series. Next, I read Control Me by Michelle Hurd. So I wanted to get back into the I don't think this one's the Monarch Academy series, but they go to Monarch Academy and it's like related to it. I think it's like the next generation of people at Monarch Academy. And it also spins off from her Sinner series that she had. Like, all of her books are connected, as all good mafias were. I had fallen off of this series, I think like either at the beginning of this year or could have even been last year. Like, I fell off because she was putting books out in such a rapid pace and I just got behind, and then that's where we're at. But I know that like the last couple books in this series are they are very highly rated by my friends, and so I want to get to them. So I just decided to hop back on this series. Now, there are audiobooks for the whole series as well, but for this one I didn't, because I didn't want to use a credit or like buy it, so I just read it. But this one was actually a like kind a professor student. It's not really, but it does have a pretty big age gap. It's 21 and like 38, I think is what it is. And the hero is doing a part-time like teaching gig at St. Monarch. So he's teaching like combat or whatever. And Abby, she really doesn't want to be there, but she's the best friend of the heroine from the first one. And so we actually do see like both of their romances are kind of happening at the same time. Like there's some overlap. Like her friend is falling for Misha, like, well, this is happening. But Abby kind of sets her sights on the teacher and she flirts with him outrageously. And he's just like, she's also from like a rival family though. And like at St. Monarchs is supposed to be neutral ground. Like there's not supposed to be any of that like interpersonal fighting going on. But obviously there are still vendettas against each other when you have the Yakuza and the Bratva and the mafia like all in the same place. Like things are going to get a little sticky. But Abby is really just panting after him for sure. And he's just like attracted to her and he's really pissed about it. So there's some angry sex in this one. And they definitely start to slip up and sleep together. Then there's a point in this story where Abby gets taken and is raped. There is partial rape on page in this book, so definitely heed that trigger warning, which the author does have all the trigger warnings in the front of this one, so they're all there. And then there is the afterwards, and seeing how Nikolai takes care of her and protects her and loves her, like, it was so sweet. The only thing is, I didn't see how their relationship really, like, got to this point for him to be that way about her. Like, they'd only slept together a couple times and he was already like, I think I need to try to have an alliance with her family so I can have her. And I was like, so this 21-year-old had like magic pussy for you? Is that what happened? Did you get pussy whipped that quick? I don't know. The relationship dynamics just made no sense in this one at all. But again, it didn't take away from how sweet the like trauma healing was in this. It was really beautiful. But it was not great. It just wasn't great. So this one was a 3.5. It was a 4 on the spice scale though, because there was slight daddy kink, there was biting, spanking, praise, and degradation, and there was trigger warnings for rape, violence, and an abusive parent. So be prepared for those. All right. Now we get to my first 6-star read of the week here. The whole rest of this week was just great for me from this point on, because I read Here With Me by Brooke Montgomery, which my physical copy will be here tomorrow. I wish it was going to be here today so I could hold it, but I had a feeling I would like this one. You know, I've been saying that. I'm so devastated that I missed out on PR boxes for this, because I saw so many people with PR boxes for this and I didn't get one, and I'm devastated about it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, because damn, this was so good. But I had read Come With Me last month. There was a free audiobook that she had out, which I think it's still free. If you go to Brooke Montgomery's Instagram, there's still a free audiobook for that. The audiobook for Here With Me should be out soon, I believe, because it's like already like being done and everything. So it should be available soon. But Here With Me is an ex-boyfriend's dad, age gap, forbidden romance, and it's also like an office romance to some degree because they're working together too. But our heroine, her name is Noah, and she's the youngest daughter of this family, and she's also a horse trainer. She helps train for different events. And she meets Noah at a rodeo a couple towns over. He's there watching it, she's there, and they have a one-night stand in the back of a food truck, and it is hot, okay? Like, it is hot. The banter is so great, and Fisher is kind of just like really taken aback by her because she's so bold, but like in a way that is very flirty, and he just loves it, honestly. And so he does kind of figure out who she is just by some things she said. He's clued into the fact that he has actually just accepted a job at her family ranch, but they're already on the way to sleeping together when he figures it out, and he's like, you know what? I want this, so I'll tell her later. Well, when she's leaving the next morning, she sees his wallet, and she looks at his driver's license and sees his last name and realizes that he's her ex-boyfriend's dad, who she's still friends with. And so she hightails it out of there, and she's like, shit, I can't ever see this guy again. Like, I'm friends with Jace. This can't happen. So she gets out of there. Now, Fisher, again, knows he's going to be working at this place. but he doesn't know that it's his son's ex-girlfriend because he's not really close with his son. Part of the reason he moved back to town is to fix this relationship. So he's been trying to call Noah to warn her, hey, I'm about to work at your family farm. Like, I'm just trying to give you a heads up. Well, she thinks he just wants to set up another date with her, and so she doesn't answer the phone. And so sure enough, when he's there for his first day, not only are they working on the same ranch, but he's basically like working for her because she's the one who is in charge of a lot of the stuff. So she's just so pissed that he didn't mention this. And he's like, I tried to call you multiple times. He's like, I wasn't going to just text you this and you didn't answer me. So I really like how their back and forth goes here as well, because she's pissed, but also like he doesn't know about the ex-boyfriend part yet. And when she finally says like, this is why I didn't answer, because I thought you wanted another date, and like I knew that if I talked with you I wouldn't be able to resist you, and like we can't because of Jace. And he's like, you're right, we can't. Not only is there a non-fraternization policy at the family ranch, but also he wants a good relationship with his son. And so he's like, yeah, I can't be with you. And it becomes even more imperative because when Jace makes overtures that he actually is ready to like settle down and get married, and that Noah is the girlfriend that he had the best time with in the past, like he may even want Noah back. And so things get very sticky very quickly. So I adored this story. I really did. I loved that they both act very mature. There are a lot of really great conversations they have. Their chemistry is over the top, but there's also a lot of like them having to refrain. So the sexual tension is so great. Like they are just want to be with each other so much, and they need to like restrain themselves. And of course, you know, they slip up a few times, but I loved it. And then there was a portion of the story where some caretaking had to take place, which I had an idea about, because when you read the prequel, there's mention of Noah getting hurt. And that Fisher was going to be pissed that she got hurt. So there's some caretaking in here that is just so beautiful. And yeah, there also is a bit of a heavier storyline that I want to give you a content warning for. There is discussion of loss of a child in the past, a suicide attempt that is pretty intense. There's also institutionalization for mental health. There's grief, and there is some animals in danger. So the author has some notes about this, how like you can skip the prequel of or the prologue of this, and you skip a lot of those triggers, but just read her notes. She does a great job warning you on it. But I loved this story. It had me tearing up multiple times. I thought it was beautiful. It was a 6-star read. I can't wait for the audio to come out. I will definitely be rereading this in December for my favorite books and listening to the audio. So this was a 6-star read. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. It definitely had some good spicy stuff. There was some good girl in here. There was some big dick moments. There was some almost public sex. You know, they're in the back of that food truck and some things like that. So it was hot, but it also had stuff that fit the characters for me. That's something I'm really looking for these days, for sure. All right, then I won't long have to do this, but I finished my reread of Brizinger by Christopher Paolini. I buddy read this with big sis Crystal, and this one definitely has a bit of a slower part in it for me than I feel like the other two had. And so that was a bit tough to get through, but still, like, rereading this and seeing how the character growth has happened and the change for these characters, like, it's so good. And I can't wait to reread Inheritance, which we might not be waiting until October to do, because I already grabbed the audiobook for the next one, and I think that we want to get started sooner than that, so maybe we will. This copy is so well loved. This is one of the ones that I borrowed to people when I was young, and it has been through some tough days here. But that's okay. It's very well loved for sure. Then I read my other 6-star read. Now, this one was a viewer recommendation. I don't have a name for who did it, but I gotta tell you, it was glorious. And I was very happy that this was a viewer rec. I've had a few rough viewer recs lately that just haven't been grand, but this one was a bullseye. So if you are the one who recommended Worth the Fall by Claudia Connor, good on you, because this was absolutely beautiful. It was fantastic. I was crying the entire time, literally the entire time, okay? And because it was so beautiful, I cried so much. So this book is a pregnant single mom of 4, soon to be 5, is on vacation. All of her kids are under 7, and she's taking them to the vacation on the beach for a week at a condo on the beach. And our hero is a Navy SEAL who is taking a couple weeks off in between missions, and he is at the same condo beach resort area with a friend. And his friend has hooked them up with a couple of women, but Matt is just kind of like, he doesn't really care to be there for women, but he's trying to enjoy his time. You know, it's very tough for him to be away from work. He's a workaholic. He feels very dedicated to his job, not planning to leave it anytime soon. He feels a heavy responsibility. He definitely has some PTSD, but he's also still like involved in missions. He's on a special, you know, SEAL team squad, all of that jazz. And then he meets this family when one of the little boys throws a foam football and it hits him in the back. And he becomes engaged with this family and ends up spending every day of his vacation with them and completely falling for them. And the mom, Abby, doesn't really know like what to make of this. I mean, she really does end up like needing his help on this vacation. Like, she wanted to do something good for her kids. She's been a widow for 6 months. Her husband and her were very much, had never been close. She is someone who is always looking for love, always looking for family. And she found a man who wanted her because she was beautiful and a beautiful object, but didn't really want more than that. He was a lawyer and a businessman, and he really just kind of left her to raise their kids. He, you know, showered her in money and, you know, new property and things like that, but he wasn't there for her. And being someone who lost both of her parents very young, was shuffled around to foster homes, like, that is what she's looking for, is family. And I mean, she has it now, and her kids, they're her tribe, but she doesn't really have a lot of like community around her. She has a few friends who are close, but that's really it. And so to have this man just literally appear and start to become such an integral part of her life is very scary for her and very like overwhelming, and makes her very like, you're gonna leave, like, there's no way you want to take on a family of 6 when you still travel for work and you do a dangerous job, and also you're going to be constantly leaving me. And that's not what she needs. She needs consistency. She needs someone who isn't going to be leaving. And Matt doesn't know how or why he's become so like attached to these people, and just immediately loves all of these children. The moments with these children, you guys, you're not ready for it, okay? And I said on my Instagram, and I stand by it, I think Matt is maybe the greatest new dad that I've ever read. I think he may unseat Tristan as the best dad. I'm not saying that Worth the Fall is necessarily the better book than The Takeover, but time will tell. Time will tell how I feel about this when I reread this, when I sit with it more, how it will be. I don't make life-altering decisions like that this quickly, okay? But when I'm reading it, I'm telling you, Matt is instantly the best. Like, he's so... his moments with every one of these little people. And the little girl, the oldest little girl, she's like 6, and she's very like, you know, shy of him, which good for you, Annie, good for you. But when he like calls her like his little princess in this, the first time he calls the kids like his kids, and when she has that new baby, he gets to be there for the new baby being born. Guys, I'm done. Put a fork in me. I'm done. It's fantastic. And the way his family, who's loud and boisterous and over the top, the way that they just take her and all of these kids in instantly. I can't, you guys. I can't. It was perfection. Like I said, I cried for 2 hours straight while I was reading this because scene after scene was just so beautiful. This book was precious. It was precious. It was so swoony. And also, this was the very first love scene in this book, which is a very good ways into this book. Like, this is not an erotic novel by any chance. It's barely a 2 on the spice scale. It's a very low steam type of book. But it is the swooniest book that I've read this year, because Matt is a prince. He's a prince. He is a hero in so many different ways. And yeah, there is a heartache having to do with like his job and like how he's gotten to this point and why he feels he can't leave the seals and things like that. Like, that stuff is hard, but oh my gosh, it is beautiful. So if you only read one of the books this week, like, I suggest that one. I suggest you don't read it on your period like I did, and I suggest you have a box of tissues and some ice cream when you read it, but it's because it's beautiful, I promise. It's like, it's gut-wrenching, but it is of the beauty. Like, this, it made me feel kind of like when I was reading Steph Bohrer, just like how beautiful the words are and like what the characters say to each other is so beautiful that I was just like flat out. I was like, what is happening right now? What is happening to me? It was beautiful stuff. So 6-star book. This was a 2 on my spice scale. Really the only kind of like, there is pregnant sex that happens in here. He's very much in love with her body, and I mean, he doesn't know it any other way for the first while, because he falls in love with her when she's already pregnant, and he's just so like, he's so into her. Oh, it's so good. But there are quite a few trigger warnings for this one. And because this is an older book too, it's from 2014, so there aren't trigger warnings written for this, so I'm going to give you a few here. There was PTSD, there's death of a spouse, death of a parent by suicide, and also war situations. So those are some of the big ones with this one. But yeah. So yeah, highly recommend this story. I'm not going to shut up about this one. I will not. It is a hidden gem. And again, if you are the one who recommended Worth the Fall, please say so I can give you a shout out, because I loved it and it's a new favorite. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. And lastly, we'll just do this one real quick because I don't have a ton to say about it. I read Salt in the Wound by Sierra Simone. She was handing these out. These are, I think the novella is even free still. There's the audiobook just came out for this, but I got this at Book Bonanza. She was giving these to everyone. This is the prequel for the Lioness trilogy. It's going to be a Tristan and Isolde retelling, and this one begins with Isolde being told that she is going to marry Mark, but not for 4 years. She's not going to be marrying Mark for 4 years, but she had wanted to be a nun and take her orders, and her father is like, haha, no, you're going to make a political marriage for me. You're not going to be a nun. And her uncle, who is for the church, wants her to be a spy, because the man she's going to be marrying is like ex-military intelligence, but now he's like a billionaire and he owns a sex club, and he's friends with Ash, who I'm a bit confused about when the time of this is taking place, because it has been a long time since I've read the new Camelot trilogy, and it's not a trilogy that I really want to reread because it hurt me a lot. But Ash is mentioned in this book, and I think that when he's in it, he's still, I don't think that he's married to his wife yet, but that is 4 years ago. So I'll be interested when I read, because I'm going to read Salt Kiss this week. It comes out on the 12th, and I have an arc for that. I'm going to read Salt Kiss, and now it's like 4 years later. When this ends, it's time for the wedding to happen, and we get introduced to her new bodyguard, which is Tristan, and this is going to be an MMF between Tristan, Mark, and Isolde. And so we'll see how that goes, and like what's happening with Ash and like his messy life over there and everything. But yeah, this is like kind of speeds through the 4 years of their engagement and how it's supposed to just be a marriage, an arranged marriage, but he really like wanted her. That's why he asked for it. And there's a lot of mind games being played, and like she's gonna spy on him, but he, has to, like, we'll see how it plays out. I have no idea where this messiness is gonna go, but honestly, like, the writing just pulls me in. And Sierra Simone has this way to just have a rock in my gut the whole time I'm reading, but I also can't like put it down. I don't know how she does that. She's a magician. She's magical. But I definitely can't wait to read Salt Kiss, and then, to wait for a million years before we get the next one. I think this one will probably just be where we get like, well, it says Honeycut will be early 2024 and Lioness the third book will be like late that year. So hopefully we'll get the next 2 next year. We'll see. Anyway, that is all the books that I read this week. As always, I have links down below for each of these. If you use my Amazon link to purchase the book, it does help out the channel, and that does make up a good chunk of my income every month, so don't be shy to use those. It means a lot to me. If you would like to support the channel in other ways, you can do it as easy as liking this video, leave me a comment, leave me a cute little pumpkin down below. Spooky season's here. I'm not a huge decorator, I promise I'm not, but I bought a couple cute things to put in my like photos and everything, so I stuck one up there behind me. But thank you